if you're not visiting Boston or Massachusetts, you're doing Black history in America wrong.
The work is not completed.
When you think about the American Revolution, what comes to mind? Probably things like Paul Revere or the Boston Tea Party. But where were Black people in all of this? So Kellie, a lot of times when we think about, I guess we could call them Black revolutionaries in some sense of the word, Crispus Attucks is the one who comes to mind as the first casualty of the American Revolution.
Yes, Crispus Attucks, extremely special. I mean, this is a man who is part Black, part indigenous, who was enslaved, who escaped slavery and becomes a sailor and is able to sort of travel the world and navigate freedom and really during precarious times. And it's this altercation that he has in Boston with British soldiers
during the Boston Massacre.
During the Boston Massacre that cost him his life. And it's also during that time that he, you know, was ridiculed and seen as sort of this thug and terrifying. It takes a long time for us to sort of like rejuvenate his legacy and see him as the hero that he was.
Okay, so that almost sounds like a foreshadowing of America's entire relationship with Black people.
It does. It does. Yes,
Yeah, so,
absolutely.
So Dart, like given that, I mean, has there been any redemption since then?
I mean, the sad part for me is that we fought so hard to get the Embrace Monument, and the Embrace Monument is there just feet from a monument that should have been dedicated to Crispus Attucks, but the people of Boston were so against and so resistant to the idea of we're going to have a monument to a Black man that they decided to open it up to all of the guys, all the people who were killed in the Boston Massacre. So that monument that's there should just be to Crispus Attucks. And it took so long for it to be made. If you Google how long it took for this monument just to be created and how many people in Boston's Black community had to fight just to have it be made, because just having Crispus Attucks' name on it was enough. And the fact that he's buried not too far away with multiple people in the same gravesite.
Wow.
It's like, it's,
and he's one of the first Black people to be buried in what is essentially a segregated cemetery. Black people weren't allowed to be buried alongside white people, which is ridiculous that even in death there is still segregation. But yeah, it's the Black community that works really hard to keep his legacy alive.
And James, you've been doing some reporting on essentially the Black roots of the American Revolution. We know Crispus Attucks wasn't the only person who was part of this. Tell us more.
Yeah, there's a number of soldiers who enlisted on the side of the Patriots at the beginning of the war. And so, I was thinking about a couple of them during the course of this reporting, one of whom is Cesar Robbins. The Robbins house is out in Concord. He didn't live there. It was built actually for his children or grandchildren later on the earlier side of like the 19th century, the 1800s. But Cesar Robbins is like a really interesting dude because, I call him, a two-time World War champ. We forget that, the American Revolution, they were fighting naval skirmishes over in Ireland, and, there was like spillover with, Dutch antagonism with the British in India, right? It's this, it spills over all these different places. And Cesar Robbins was he was a troop in the American Revolution on the side of the Patriots and also in the French and Indian War. He spent decades in some capacity as a soldier, in what would become the United States. And that house still stands. But, on the other side of that, too, I was also following the story of a man named Brister Freeman, who was enslaved to John Cumming, who was a Harvard-educated doctor, a town leader in Concord at the time. But he was also provided the seed funding for Harvard Medical School. He just wasn't, enslaved to some ordinary, white guy, right? These are names that still exist, and are memorialized in places. And the Robbins story is interesting because he enlisted 3 separate times over the course of the war, each time kind of getting closer to emancipation. We don't exactly know how he was emancipated, but we just know by the end of the war, he was considered a free man. It's the name that he took for himself, Bristol Freeman. And the tragic issue, right, is after he comes back from the war, John Cumming doesn't leave him any money. You're emancipated, but he gives money to the town just in case, this dude doesn't have enough to cover for himself. The town can chip in and help him out.
And this is a story we hear time and time again throughout American history, right? Soldiers who fight for the freedom and the protection of this country not being able to reap that same freedom and protection upon coming back home.
Terrible irony.
I mean, we hear that all. You take it to World War II and the GI Bill and black veterans who weren't able to take advantage of GI benefits and going to school and buying homes. And there's a big part of that viability that allowed black people to get access to the black middle class and things of that nature that is completely cut out because black people have been left out of that.
When you look at the Revolutionary War, you think of people like Peter Salem Poor, and then you think about the saddest case, in my opinion, Phillis Wheatley. Phillis Wheatley was a Revolutionary War hero. She wrote poems for the cause. She wrote all these different pieces for the cause. She was seen as one of the major pieces of the revolution, and she died penniless and after childbirth, and she's buried in Copp's Hill Burying Ground on a patch of land is bare. But we have statues of her along the Commonwealth Avenue Mall. There's a school named after her in Roxbury. And, we don't know exactly where she's buried, and she died broken, and it's sad.
Compensation never comes during their lifetime. It always comes 100, 200
and
years
we keep
later.
seeing that same through line.
She was the first black person, woman, that was published. And they had to fight for this woman to be published. They took her to England.
Internationally, not just here, you know.
She was tested at Harvard.
To see her as an intellectual, credited as an intellectual. It's great to see.
So Dart, what you're talking about, and we alluded to this earlier, right, is a lot of this reclaiming of history by black communities often when that history has been erased or revised. Now, Everyone 250, which you're a co-chair of, is an effort to tell a more full story of the American Revolution and also contextualize that for today. Why do we have to do that?
Well, I fell into the role of co-chair of the Historic Sites Committee because I spent so many years writing about all this history of Boston's black history, Boston and Massachusetts black history. But I used to always say that every Black History Month, if you're not visiting Boston or Massachusetts, you're doing black history in America wrong. There's so many firsts, so many important spaces, and the thing is that I did a whole piece for Boston Magazine about Copp's Hill Burying Ground because the very first sizable community of freed and just black folks in the colonies was in that New Guinea community of North End between 1650 and 1850. And the only thing we have remaining as proof that those people were there are headstones I can count on one hand. And that patch of land that's just along Snow Hill Road where, between I think 1,000 and 1,500 Black Bostonians over a span of 200 years are buried. So that's why E250, thinks it's important for us to highlight all of Boston. Again, I was born in 1975. And the bicentennial was 1976. So between 1975 and 1976, a bunch of people were going around stamping things saying, this is what a historical thing to Boston is. And very often we were left outside of that. Between 1979 and 1980, they came back and did it again because we're celebrating Boston's 350th anniversary. Again, Black Boston history was very much left on the outskirts of that. And now here I am in this precarious situation where I get to fix all these years of wrongdoing.
Fix it. It's done. So I hear what you're saying about black people needing to visit Boston or Massachusetts during Black History Month, but we got to be honest about the perception of Boston to the rest of this country.
That's part of the reason why.
How do you think that this is going to help fix that?
It has to, because again, I'll never forget arriving at Morgan State University in the spring semester of 1996 and having to explain to everyone that there are black people in Boston, there have been black people in Boston since 1630, and that I'm not one of 5 black people in Boston, and I'm not a member of New Edition.
Yes.
So it's been an uphill battle, and I think that this absolutely would help.
It's a struggle. And that there are black people who are in Boston and that they're thriving and that they enjoy and love the city that they live in. I mean, I think there's a lot of bad PR about Boston, and some of that's well deserved. But But there's also a lot of vibrancy and rich Black history that we just don't talk about enough. I mean, I study the abolitionist movement, and you can't look at the abolitionist movement without looking at Black Boston. You can't look at the African Meeting House or David Walker or Mariah Stewart or Lewis Hayden or William Cooper Nell, all of these people that were, you know, instrumental in the movement.
And to that point, I think, right, part of the reason why I'm, I guess, interested, invested, right, in the understanding of Black history in a city like Boston, especially, right, at a time like the turn of the 18th, 19th century, is because the Boston as a place, the American Revolution as an event, they occupy this mythical status in like our national imagination. It's almost unreal, right? You close your eyes and there is a conditioned vision of what that looked like. And then it makes you second guess yourself, especially I would guess if you're young, right? What, am I there? Is anything here for me? Did my cultural forebears do anything, you know, to pour into the creation of this thing that's hailed as like, you know, a beacon of freedom and hope, you know, for the world? And it's almost like a cultural obligation to do some myth busting. Right? It makes it that much more real and tangible as an experience.
You know what's interesting hearing you all talk about this is I think about Philadelphia, right? Another place that we contend with when we talk about the birthplace of America. Philadelphia is a real Black city. It's very evident, right? Not to say that Boston is not, but I think when we think about perception, right, Philly is just in a different category. How have they been able to kind of skirt this illusion, so to speak?
Representation. A lot of it has to do with representation. When one thing I always do, I do an exercise, and this is unfortunate that I still have to do this. I do an exercise with people, and I say, name 5 Black people from Boston. Name 5 Latinos from Boston.
Got 4
name 5
right
Black
here.
people from name 5 Black people from Massachusetts. You know, name 5. Name in this field. And if I say name 5 Black folks from Chicago, name 5 Black folks from Philly, name 5 Black people from New Orleans, people can just rattle off names. And in Boston, they have to fight. They
can't even name Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, and Mike. And Ralph.
It's so sad. It's so sad that those are the 5.
It's right there.
It's so sad. And it's a lot of times I do that. I was like, and not New Edition. You know? And they're like, oh my God. And I was like, you could have said Donna Summer. Donna Summer's from Boston? Yeah. So this is the uphill battle we have to fight in terms of representation. That's why, like, my early days of writing, I would just inform people that, oh yeah, by the way, they're from Boston. They're from Boston. They're from Boston. I was telling everybody that homegirl was from Dorchester for years, and now she's blowing up, and the mayor declared it her day.
Io Edgeberry.
Yeah. Io Edgeberry.
The actor.
Declared it her day while she was visiting Boston Latin School. And I remember going on Twitter back when it was something you did and saying, she's from Dorchester. People like, what? Really? Are you
gotta
sure?
let them know. You gotta let them know.
I would tell everybody Michael Beach is from Roxbury, like everything. You know?
So as we are still fighting for this representation, not only in the city and the state, but to the rest of the country and the world, would you say for Black people that the American Revolution is still ongoing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The work is not completed. And anytime I think we get comfortable and think that the work is completed, that makes us prime for someone to come in and dismantle and destroy the progress that has been made. And we're seeing that right now. Like, a lot of the work and the progress that has been made is being rolled back, and there's a backlash to that. And so if we don't continue to fight and continue to be active at keeping these ideas and these memories and this history alive, it can absolutely be lost.
A funny thing to me is that if you were to go to Wikipedia right now and type in American Revolution, you're going to get 2 pages. You're going to get the Revolutionary War, and you're going to get the Revolution. And that's important to me because the war happened. There's a beginning, there's an end. The American Revolution, right, you think about it maybe as an offshoot of the Enlightenment. It's an intellectual movement. It's a cultural movement. It's a social movement. It's a fight, you know, that spills over into a war for representation. You could argue, I can make the case, the American Revolution can be for anybody, a group, you know, a nation within a border, an individual, right? That revolutionary activity, in whatever way you want to call it, as long as it pertains to, again, that, you know, that furthering of identity, of self, of voice, of being present in the decision making, you know, and in the collaboration.
I mean, that's the essence of democracy.
Exactly. Like that is, the American Revolution never, we talk about the Constitution as a living document. The revolution it's ongoing. It's up to whoever to decide to take that up and define what that means, you know, for them. The revolution's not over.
Period. To be continued. Well, we definitely have more to talk about as we see how 250 unfolds and as we see how this current moment we're living in unfolds. Before I let all of you go, I'm going to ask you what I ask everyone here. What's one thing that keeps you rooted?
The work, knowing that it's ongoing. Like there was a saying in a film, it says, fashion is never finished. Well, this work is never finished. Like it's a living, breathing thing, and you have to keep working at it in order to keep it thriving.
James, what about you?
Cultural uplift. Quickly, I was on Twitter. Someone had tweeted, "There's no album in the history of music with 10 out of 10 tracks that are unskippable." I know who this person was, and I just thought to myself, I can name so many.
Literally.
And you just, you know, just baptize, immerse, you know, in that.
Please.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
That keeps me grounded, rooted, if you will.
I love it. I'm going to say it's probably a corny answer, but it's my students. You know, as a professor, my students, I'm teaching the next generation of leaders. At Wellesley College, I feel like I'm teaching the next generation of global leaders, of women leaders, and that to me is very exciting, but also like they give me life and they give me hope for what this country might be in store for.
As a brother, as an alum of Wellesley College, I thank you.
Can't tell you how many times people confuse Wesley and Wesleyan. My God, if I had $1.
Well, Kellie, James, and Dart, thank you all so much.